In world news tonight, freedom for the Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat. His headquarters no longer a prison. ABC's Ted Koppel asked the Israeli Prime Minister how much freedom Mr. Arafat will have. An ABC News exclusive. The 5-year-old girl who vanished and no one noticed for a year. We'll take a closer look at a huge hole in the welfare system. Medicine on the cutting edge. If the French can clear up allergies without a shot, why not here? And able to recognize a foot-long object 100 miles away in a snowstorm. Now that's a spy plane.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to begin in the Middle East this evening, where there have been some pretty dramatic developments in just the last couple of hours. First of all, the Israelis have pulled away from Yasser Arafat's compound in Ramallah, and there has been an unexplained explosion and some fire at the Church of Nativity, or near it, in Bethlehem. That's what it looked like. It's a little hard to explain. The Palestinian spokesman said the Israelis had tried to mount an assault on the church. The Israelis said no, there had been fire from inside the church and they had returned fire, but there has been a fire which broke out. It is now down, if not out altogether. We're not absolutely sure. It's in the Church of the Nativity itself, and the Israelis say that fire trucks have been on the way. But it's a very uncertain situation there, and as often as always happens in these circumstances, the Palestinians and the Israelis will soon be blaming each other for the circumstances. The more positive news tonight does occur beyond Jerusalem, to the east of Jerusalem, in the city of Ramallah, where Yasser Arafat has had his headquarters for a very long time. And tonight, for the first time since the month of March, Mr. Arafat is, relatively speaking, a free man. The Israelis have withdrawn from his compound. He is no longer their prisoner. ABC's Gillian Finley picks up that part of the story from there tonight. Gillian?
Peter, you're right. It does appear that the Israeli army has kept its promise here tonight. They have withdrawn from around Mr. Arafat's compound. And even though you can't see it from here, we understand that Palestinians are starting to pour into that compound and that a celebration has begun. The armored vehicles have been rolling out for the last few hours. Some of the dozens of tanks, personnel carriers, and bulldozers that have been maintaining Israel's siege here for more than a month. It all began at dusk. Under Israeli military escort, the convoy of armored diplomatic cars moved into Ramallah. Security was tight. Cameras were kept at a distance. 2 hours later, the convoy left Mr. Arafat's compound carrying the men Israel had wanted to put on trial. Instead, they were driven to a Palestinian prison in the town of Jericho in a deal brokered by the United States. American diplomatic security agents escorted the prisoners. Once in jail, American and British guards will monitor them. It was a strangely quiet end to a standoff that started so dramatically, with Israeli tanks and bulldozers knocking down the walls of the presidential compound and confining Mr. Arafat and his aides to 2 small rooms. Israel's goal was to isolate the Palestinian leader, but the images of the 72-year-old Arafat, defiant, conducting interviews by cell phone and candlelight, only heightened his popularity. Even Israeli officials acknowledge that when Mr. Arafat does emerge from his compound, he will be stronger than ever. And when he does leave, Peter, Israel says he will be free to travel wherever he wants. According to Mr. Arafat's aides, the first place he will go will be the Jenin refugee camp to see for himself the damage that Israel's army did there.
Thanks,
Peter?
Gillian. Gillian Finley in Ramallah. Whatever Yasser Arafat does in the days and weeks ahead, wherever he goes, whomever he sees, he will be watched very carefully by those who wish him well and those who wish he'd disappear altogether. The Israeli Prime Minister, Ariel Sharone, gave Ted Koppel of ABC an exclusive interview today. It was subject number 1.
What about Arafat?
He can move around.
Can he leave the country?
He can leave the country, yes.
Can he come back?
We are not giving any guarantees for that. We're not asked to give any guarantees. We're not going to give any guarantees because usually in the past, when he left, it was always a sign for a wave of terror. So if it will be a wave of terror, and if we'll be going around the world inciting, and then we'll have to consider We'll discuss what to do.
Prime Minister, you know that by refusing to let the UN investigating team in, you cause many people around the world to say, what do the Israelis have to hide?
We do not have anything to hide. I think that the Israeli armed forces got very high and emphasized very high moral values. And we paid, in the past and now, we paid heavy casualties only in order to avoid causing casualties to civilians. I never saw the United Nations were so determined to send fact-finding a commission to other places. Didn't send to see what happened in the Passover Eve when 28 people were killed.
What if somebody said, Prime Minister, fine, we will investigate those incidents, you let us investigate Jenin? What would your answer be?
Look, that's no problem. But that should be, everything should be investigated. Everything. I don't think that Israel should be tried by the world.
There's going to be more about this, of course, during Ted Koppel's edition of Nightline later this evening. Now to Afghanistan. ABC News has been told that close to 1,000 American troops are in the area of eastern Afghanistan near the border with Pakistan. They are looking for al-Qaeda and Taliban fighters. The U.S. apparently believes they are there. ABC's Martha Raddatz is at the Pentagon tonight. Martha, what can you tell us?
Well, Peter, there's not very strong evidence. Most of it is anecdotal. Local villagers saying, look, they're back. We've seen al-Qaeda fighters and Taliban fighters in the neighborhood. But also there are the caves that the United States had already bombed, already searched. They've now searched again and found evidence of new ammunition caches and weapons caches, Peter.
In a one-word answer, if you can, do they think their intelligence is good this time?
I can't give you a one-word answer. They think it's pretty good.
Good, thanks very much. Martha Raddatz at the Pentagon. Other items in the overseas briefing. In France today, more than 1 million people took part in demonstrations against the far-right leader Jean-Marie Le Pen. Thousands of riot police were deployed to keep Mr. Le Pen's supporters and his many enemies apart. There were rallies in several parts of the world today to mark workers' holiday, May Day. In London, demonstrators unhappy about issues ranging from globalization to the environment demonstrated in various parts of the city. In the southern Philippines today, the Abu Sayyeff rebel group has threatened to kill the American couple it has been holding for a year. The leader of the group, which the U.S. says has links to al-Qaeda, apparently said he was no longer interested in negotiations.